Um, Good morning again. My name is Kate Flatley, and I'm the Senior Program Director at the Incarnate Word Foundation. We are so happy to have so many of you here with us today for our 2024 General Grant Cycle Orientation. Before we jump into the presentation, I just want to do a little housekeeping. This will be in webinar format. We have over 280 people registered to attend, so we thought that would be simpler. We will be sending out after this a link to all the slides I'll be going through today, as well as a recording to share with any colleagues that might not be here today, or for you to reference as you apply for the grant program. We will also have time for questions at the end of the presentation. However, there is a Q&A feature that you should see at the bottom of your screen. Please feel free to drop questions in there as we go along through the presentation. My colleague, Mary Fossage, is monitoring that. There are some questions she may be able to answer right away, but at the end of the presentation, she'll read those out if they're questions that she thinks everyone would appreciate an answer to. So please utilize that feature. I also want to let you know I have either I'm experiencing St. Louis allergies or a St. Louis spring cold. So I'm going to probably be sipping tea along this webinar, and hopefully do not have to blow my nose and can spare you all of that. This is just a little bit of an overview of what you can expect from today's orientation. This should only take about 25 minutes, so we should have plenty of time for those questions and answers at the end of the presentation. We always like to start our orientation with a little bit of background about the Incarnate Word Foundation. This is a large group, and I'm sure many of you are familiar with us, but there might be some new people, and it's always just good to have a refresher. So the Incarnate Word Foundation is sponsored by the Sisters of Charity of the Incarnate Word, a group of Catholic religious women based in San Antonio, Texas. The foundation was formed by the sale of Incarnate Word Hospital. The hospital was located at the corner of Lafayette and Grand, and the building still stands there today. It's now part of SLU's campus. It's the College of Public Health and Social Justice. So proceeds from the sale of the hospital started the foundation with the mission really to continue the charisms of the sisters here in St. Louis. The mission or the charisms of the sisters is that of incarnational spirituality, meaning really that God is present in all we do, that we see God in everyone that we encounter and in one another. So relationships are really the cornerstone of what we believe, and why we as an organization try to be relational in the work we do. We don't always succeed, again, but we try, and we've been trying for 25 years. Our mission is to simply make real the healing love of Jesus Christ, the Incarnate Word, and we do that by living our values. For those of you that have been around for a while, you might see that these values are a little different than the ones you're used to. We did update these in 2023. Our values are equity, respect, compassion, inclusion, dignity, joy, and love. Again, love keeps coming up, and I think it's a pretty unique thing for a foundation to say that love is both in their mission and in their values, but it is at the center of what we do. It's recognizing God in others and treating them with the love and respect they deserve. Our role in all of this is try to help these values become more prevalent in our society and community by partnering with organizations that demonstrate these values. Alongside our general grant cycle, we have other projects and initiatives and work in the community in a variety of ways. Some of the highlights from 2023 include funding the Bridge of Hope in Lincoln County, an emergency housing and crisis center that joyfully opened not too long ago, supporting the growth of St. Louis Survivors Legal Services, as well as St. Joseph's Housing's expansion into North St. Louis. We also hosted a series of educational opportunities, convenings, and presentations to help educate, as well as unify and collaborate with the community. In 2023, we also had a record general grant cycle. We had more than 276 letters of intent. This was over almost double what we typically get in a general grant cycle. Ultimately, we funded 59 organizations in that grant cycle. In 2023, our team also expanded. I'm on the slide, obviously, but Bridget Flood, the executive director, has led our foundation since its inception. We're also lucky to have Sister Helena Monahan, a sister of Charity of the Incarnate Word, working alongside us every day. Mary Fossage joined the team in June. She's our Senior Director of Communications. She's also on this call today. And we added Sarah Banks, our administrative assistant. So this is the Incarnate Word Foundation team. Our goal for the 2024 general grant cycle is, again, to continue that charism of the sisters by living our mission and values. And we do this in collaboration with all of you, the organizations working in the community to address the root causes, formulating systems changes, and helping those in need, the most vulnerable in our community, by being love in action. We are excited to launch this, to work with all of you, and to learn about the good that is being done in our community. Again, last year was an unprecedented year for our foundation and the General Grant Cycle program, with 276 LOI applications being submitted. We want to be good, trusted partners to all of you. And so we decided to try to be as explicit as we can on the front end about what we will fund and what we won't be funding this year. We don't want to waste your time, which we know is precious and valuable, filling out a lengthy application if you might not receive funding. So we've done this by developing our top funding priorities for 2024, as well as our secondary focus areas. And this is what I'll be reviewing now. Again, we recognize the critical importance of various service agencies and sectors. These are just the things that have risen to the top as our priorities for 2024. First, organizations that are active within the Dutchtown and Gravois Park neighborhoods, as well as North St. Louis communities. We have several partners in this region, and we work with them to try to make a real impact in that community. We also prioritize Catholic and faith-based organizations. Now, you do not have to be a Catholic organization or faith-based. We do fund non-sectarian agencies. We're also committed to advancing diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging, and the organizations that promote these. We're dedicated to assisting immigrants and refugees and in accompanying them, excuse me. We want to work to assist immigrants and refugees and the organizations that are accompanying them along their journey. We're also interested in funding agencies focused on serving youth and/or women. This could look like anything from a maternal and baby home to after-school programming and anywhere in between. We're interested in economic development efforts and wealth building in our region, as well as alleviating food insecurity. Again, this could be community farms to food pantries. The most important thing is that your organization aligns with our mission and values. Our secondary focus areas this year, again, we want to acknowledge the vital role all nonprofits and community service agencies play in our region. We just simply are unable to fund them all. So these sectors will be a little bit lower of a priority in our general grant cycle, and they include arts and cultures projects, employment and workforce development initiatives, ex-offender programs, homelessness assistance programs, support services, as well as support services for older adults. New to the application this year will be a question with check boxes asking you about your alignment to these sectors, both our primary funding sectors and/or our secondary focus areas. Again, our hope is that we're as transparent and honest with you and your colleagues about our funding priorities this year. You'll see this right away in the LOI application, and we ask you to please check all the boxes that apply. There will also be an others box to include a sector that might not be represented, but you still feel is eligible, because there are non-eligible categories this year. Again, we want to be direct and not waste your time because we know how valuable that is. Our non-eligible sectors include advocacy, charter and public schools, disease-specific health interventions, endowments and capital campaigns, hospital and clinical care facilities, organizations with operating budgets exceeding 1.5 million, large cultural organizations. This includes things like the Art Museum, the Repertory Theater, the History Museum. We actually fund very few arts organizations, and the ones that we do in the past have been small, working in our community with our neighborhood partners, and we're partnering with a lot of our Catholic schools. We just want to keep that in mind and be upfront about that. We also, a non-eligible sector will be local branches of large national organizations, re-granting programs, and universities and colleges, which typically universities and colleges do have operating budgets that exceed 1.5 million. If you have questions about these sectors and your eligibility, about your specific agency, please feel free to reach out to me after this presentation. I'm happy to have a conversation with anyone. Again, we want to be in relationship with our community. And just because we might not be able to fund your project doesn't mean we don't believe that you're doing good work and would find value in a conversation with you. Aside from these funding priorities, there are requirements for our general grant program. You may not know, but our max award for our general grant program is $10,000. Typically, our grants range from $3,000 to $10,000, with the average last year being about 5 to 7. Again, that was because of the sheer volume of applications that we received and what we were able to fund. We fund general operating support, meaning you do not need to be super program specific or parcel out exactly what this money will be used for. For example, we don't need to know that this will be used for 3 soccer balls and 5 jump ropes at your Boys and Girls Club, or that it will cover the cost of a social worker's salary part-time every other Tuesday. A part of being relational with you is that we trust you, and we trust that you know how to spend that money. But please tell us about your programs. We're not saying you can't do that. It helps us to get to know you and know the work you're doing, but you don't have to be so specific. Our other big requirements for our grant program is that you connect to our values and our sisters' view of the world. That you have strong community partners and they are working hand in hand with the community you're serving, not parachuting in. Our work is focused mainly in the Metro St. Louis, including East St. Louis. However, we can fund throughout the state. So if you have a good idea and are in a rural area, please submit an application. But we just want to be honest with you that as of late, most of our focus areas have been in the metro region. You are required to hold 501c3 status. However, if you're a new agency or a smaller organization and don't have that status yet, we will accept a fiscal sponsorship, but we'll need proof of that relationship, and the same documentation that we require of all applicants will be required of you as well. These include a W-9, which is a short form that's downloadable from the IRS's website. We need this to cut a check, which is why we're all here. We will also need your 2023 Form 990. This is what you would have submitted to the IRS in 2023. If you have an extension, that's okay, but we'll just need paperwork stating that you have an extension. We'll also need your IRS federal letter of determination. Please do not submit your Missouri federal tax letter. This is not the same thing. This is a federal letter that says that you're a 501c3 organization. For Catholic organizations, this would be a letter from the U.S. Catholic Bishops' Conference. Other religious organizations might have something similar through a larger denomination too, but we just want to stress that this is a federal letter. Without these three things, we won't be able to review your final application, and these will be asked for if you are invited to submit your full application. You won't need this as part of the LOI process. And then our last requirement is that if you've been funded by our organization for 3 consecutive years, we ask that you take a year off and give another agency a chance. Again, it needs to be consecutive years. So if you took 2023 off, welcome back. We're happy to have you. We just ask that if you've been funded for 3 years, that you do take a year off so we're able to meet new agencies. Your funding history, if you have questions about that, Mary and I are happy to answer that, but also your funding history should be available in your Foundant profile. Foundant is the system that we use for our grant cycle. That will open immediately, or no, excuse me, that will open at noon today following this presentation. We will go in and switch that on. It is an online portal where you will create a profile for your organization if you don't already have one. Mary and I, again, are happy to help you if you feel like you've got logged out, or if you have switched organizations and need to be partnered with a new agency, please just let us know. We utilize a 2-step system. So the letter of intent or inquiry application will open today, and that will be due Friday, May 24th, 2024. This is a simple and short application. Again, we don't want to create too much work on your end. That's never our too much work for anyone. That's never our goal. But we want to get a clear picture of your agency and the work that you're doing. I want to encourage you to log on to Foundant as soon as you can. Make sure you have access to that and can view the application, the LOI application. We also encourage you to turn in that LOI early. We don't want to be fielding calls at 3 p.m. the day it's due because of problems with your computer crashing or you're suddenly locked out of the system. I especially stress this because Friday, May 24th is the Friday before Memorial Day weekend. And I think the last thing anyone wants to be worrying about before a long holiday weekend is hitting submit on an application. But once those are submitted, we'll begin our review process that following month. And then July 1st, we will narrow down that pool and invite about, last year it was about 50 to 60 people, agencies, to submit a full application. In typical years, that number's been about 40 to 50. But again, last year was a little unprecedented. If you are invited to submit a full application, please do. There is a good chance that you'll get funding. It's always frustrating every year when we invite agencies to submit an application and then they don't turn one in. It's frustrating because then we can't support you with funding, but also because a spot was then taken from another agency. The full application will be due on Friday, July 26th. The application is the same setup as last year, where if you've answered a question in the LOI, these will be pre-filled or automatically generated into the application to save time and reduce the duplication of efforts. Again, we're hoping to keep it simple and accessible for you. Our application will ask you for those 3 documents that I talked about earlier, the W-9, your 2020, your 2023 Form 990, and the IRS Federal Letter of Determination. It will also get into a little bit more in-depth questions, including about financials and things like that. But that's all on the full application side. Once we send those invitations out for the full application, we'll also be beginning site visits on our end. Those will start in July and maybe even run through August. In the past, our team has done these both in person and on Zoom. We prefer for these to be in person because then we get to meet all of you, see the places you're working, and in some cases, even meet the people you serve. With that, though, please make sure that your emails are up to date in our Foundant system, because that's how we communicate with you, is through that contact person that's listed in our system, in our database. So that's who we'll email to set up those site visits. So please make sure that's up to date. Once those site visits are done and we've been able to review your application, we will make grant announcements in September. We have a board meeting in September and we need to get their approval. And then we will send out notifications. And that's really when the fun begins. We have an awards breakfast where we hand out checks. It's fun. Bridget gets to play Oprah. Everyone gets a check. Last year, this was held at the Forest Park Golf Course, and it was really just a celebration of all the work you're doing. It's an opportunity to be with you in community and celebrate the impact that all of you are having in the region. Something that is not listed on this timeline is the evaluation. And it's not on this chart because it will happen kind of so far from now in 2026. I did want to talk about it with you, though, so you know what our evaluation process looks like. So for the last 2 years, we have adopted a focus group evaluation model, hosting 4 to 5 focus groups with 10 to 12 agencies per session, with 1 person representing each organization. We have had great conversation and great feedback from these focus groups. It's allowed agencies to connect, brainstorm, and learn from one another. It's also allowed us to continue to learn from all of you. Again, you're the subject matter experts. You're the ones in the community seeing the needs and helping people, and really strengthen the relationships for all of us involved. It also saved organizations from writing a lengthy report and saved us from having to read a lengthy report. So the timeline for this would be funds are awarded at the end of 2024 with the expectation that you'll be spending them in 2025. And then we would get you back together in early 2026. These have been held in February in the past. We will remind you along every step of the way because we know February 2026 might not be on your radar, but that is also why it's important to keep your contact information updated and Foundant. That is the contact information we'll use. We know people leave, so it might be a good idea for your organization to create a generic email, something like grants@yourorg.com, that multiple people check that inbox. Because if you don't attend a focus group evaluation, you will not be eligible, for future funding. But again, we'll remind you along the way. So before we get to questions, that really is the majority of our presentation. I just want to share with you my contact information. My email is on the screen along with my cell phone number. Please feel free to reach out to me on using both those mediums. I'm happy to answer any questions. Our website is also up. That is one of the best ways to access our grant portal. This is also where the recording of this orientation video, along with the slide deck, will live. So please utilize those resources. And again, before we jump into the Q&A, want to offer these final reminders. Log in as soon as you can to make sure you have access to Foundant, or excuse me, have access to Foundant. And pay attention to those due dates. Submitting early is always better. And please, please don't hesitate to ask questions. We're here to connect with you. We want to be helpful. We love the general grant cycle. We love getting out and meeting all of you and seeing the good work you're doing in our region. So we're very excited that the program is launching. This is a quote from one of our founders, a soul for God and a heart for their neighbors. So I'm going to just leave that up on the screen and and ask Mary to come in and with any questions that she may have from the larger group.
Sure thing. Thank you. So first off, we've had a few questions already about locations and where we grant monies, and I was able to go ahead and just answer those in the chat, but just quick reminder, which Kate already touched on, is we are able to grant funds throughout the state of Missouri as well as in the Metro East in Illinois. Typically for our general grant cycle, our funded partners tend to come from the counties in and around St. Louis, as well as over on the east side. So it's pretty regionalized to our area. And then our next question that we do need an answer is how do we define advocacy when we say that we cannot fund it?
So typically, I know advocacy can be funded or can be answered in a lot of different ways. We follow, so I would say a lot of the things, we shy away from the advocacy space because we fund, we are a Catholic organization and follow Catholic social teaching. And a lot of advocacy work also follows that. I'm not saying that, but we just have to be conscious of things that can get embedded with like, oh gosh, I'm mucking this up and I'm really apologize. I'm going to start over. I blame the cold medicine.
It's okay. I think lobbying is really where we have to draw the line.
I think we can leave it at that. Thank you, Mary.
Sure. Okay. And then the next question is, in place of a 990, would a most recent annual audit be acceptable in terms of those financial documents?
No, I mean, I think we need your 990. Again, if you have an extension, but we need to see that document.
Thank you, Kate.
Thank you.
And then let's see, we've noted that mental health clinics are not eligible for this grant cycle. Does that imply that mental health services, counseling or screening in general would also not be eligible?
Yes, we, just to be transparent, we don't fund a lot in that space, and we think there are dollars that other agencies are putting towards that. And that is not one of our priorities this year.
So if an agency is headquartered in St. Louis, but the fiscal sponsor is located out of state, are we still eligible for funding?
You are. You are, yes. So we just ask that we just want to make sure that your work is being done regionally, and is happening here in St. Louis. But if your fiscal sponsor is out of state, that is okay. We've had that happen in the past.
Yep. We do have a question. Can we please put up the slide for non-eligible activities again?
Sure. I'm going to click back. And again, I apologize, my fumble earlier. I'm not firing on all cylinders this morning.
And then we had another question about 990. If they are exempt for the IRS, but they would just need to supply the letter advising of that. Correct? Like, for instance, if it's a church or.
Yes. Yeah, we need that federal letter of determination.
We had another question about 990s. These are great. Y'all keep them coming. One organization has their fiscal year beginning on May 1, so they would not have their 2023 990, before the LOI is due. So would the 2022 990 be appropriate? And I do want to clarify, we don't ask for your 990 until the application phase. So in this LOI phase, you will not need it. But yes, a 2022 would be acceptable. It would be your most recent 990.
Thanks, Mary.
You're welcome. We do have someone from Cleveland. Yes, work in Cleveland is not eligible for these grants. This is specific to Missouri and Metro East Illinois.
And that's based on our articles of incorporation.
Let's see. We had an answer on if folks would be receiving an access code for the LOI because you're logged into Foundant right now, but you're getting a message that you need an access code. So that application would be live at noon today.
And you won't need an access code then. That's just for other grant programs that we have, that you would need an access code for those applications. And that's why the home screen's saying that right now. But once this LOI application goes live at noon, you won't need an access code.
The next question is about the PowerPoint being emailed. Yes, the presentation will be emailed to participants. The video of this recording will be available online, and this presentation will also be available online. So you all will have access to all of this information at your leisure. Let's see. All right, what if an organization is a startup and they do not have a 990 completed yet?
I am going to have to get back to you on that. I will talk to our executive director and see what the policy around that is. If you, or if Mary or I want to capture that person's name and email, I can send you a follow-up for that.
Awesome. And then we had a few questions about the budget, that limitation at 1.5 million, if that is new this year.
That is new this year. Again, we are trying to be as transparent and honest, and our sweet spot kind of has always been for the general grant cycle program, these smaller grassroots agencies. And we just determined that that's the lane we want to stay in. So it was a conversation around the table that we debated for a while, but really we felt like budget was an easy way to help contain kind of the number of applications we were receiving. So that is new this year.
Fantastic. We have a question here. Can an agency submit more than one LOI for different programs? Kate, do you want to take this one?
Sure. Yeah, no, no, you can only submit one application because we fund general operating for your organization overall. This is not program specific funding. So we just ask that each organization submit one application. If you want to have a separate conversation about that and why or what that looks like, I'm happy to have that with you later, but no, we typically can only submit one application for general operating funds.
All right. Can you clarify a bit more about not funding disease-specific initiatives? For example, how would you view support for vulnerable women undergoing treatment for cancer?
So again, that is a great example. We have in the past, but we've decided not to fund in that medical space. So this is a change for us too. So things like the American Heart Association or American Cancer Society, those disease-specific agencies, while we know you do wonderful work, that is just not where our priority will be this year.
Okay. Can you clarify, are Catholic schools eligible for this grant cycle?
Catholic schools are eligible, yes.
Let's see. So I'm going to need some clarification from somebody on this. So give me just a hot second. physical office location, the question is, Kate, is a physical office location a mandatory requirement?
No, you don't have to have a bricks and mortar, if that's what you're asking. You can be operating a program in the community and not have a bricks and mortar. The questions on the LOI are just going to talk about the areas that you serve. So hopefully that answers your question.
Are we funding in the youth leadership space?
I would say that is a youth program. So submitting an application, please feel free. Youth programming or working with youth was one of our priorities this year.
This next question, I think I can answer, but it's an interesting one that we could also take under advisement. So it's about specifically the focus group participation for feedback. Is it just for those who receive grants, or will it be open to all who desire to receive grants? In other words, who will be invited to participate in the focus groups? Specifically for this general grant cycle, it's for people who have already gotten the grants, and then we see how the year went with them. But in the future, we definitely could invite other community members for various focus groups. Thank you, Cassandra. Let's see here. Do we suggest a conversation with us prior to submitting an LOI if you're unsure it is a good fit?
Yes, please do. Again, we want to be transparent and direct, and we value your time, and we don't want to, send you down filling out an application. So please feel free to reach out and have a conversation about your specific organization.
And then I have some additional questions about folks with budgets larger than 1.5 million. Again, that's a new one this year. Incorrect. If your budget was smaller in the past, but is now surpassing that, then that doesn't mean for this year, you're ineligible for the general grant cycle. But then we did have a couple of questions about if there are other opportunities for grants outside the general grant cycle. And I would say that's a yes, right, Kate? But those are done on usually project or other focus based, but go ahead.
Yeah, no, just to echo what you said, Mary, you're totally right. But we do offer other funding and other avenues. So we could have a conversation or a meeting about projects and programs that you have going on. But for this general grant cycle, these are our funding priorities and what is eligible this year.
And I would add to that funding for other grants, whether it's collaborative, project, et cetera, do not follow the exact same guidelines as our general grant cycle. Correct. Okay. Apologies, I had one that I needed clarification on, and now I have it, and now I'm missing the original question. So specifically for an organization providing social and emotional learning for children, and I think the question is if they would be eligible. So youth development organization that provides faith-based social and emotional learning programming to youth in the juvenile detention center and schools be eligible.
Yes, I know this is so hard because there's such a gray area, because I know so many organizations are doing so much good work, and things kind of could fade into one category or the other. I would say yes, something like that would be eligible because it is working with youth, and so yes.
The next question about the budget is if the individual organization has a budget lower than 1.5 million, but their fiscal sponsor is larger, then that is still fine. Your organization is under 1.5 million, which is common for fiscal sponsors to have much larger budgets, you would still be eligible. . 'Cause 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 'C let's see. I think we've gotten to most of these, so just give me a quick second to review. Okay, so one more question about budget. We do have an organization that is developing a new program that does not have a budget of 1.5. However, since they're a larger international organization, collectively, there's a very large budget, but this individual project does not have that. I would say for this general grant cycle, that would be ineligible for this. But we do, as Kate mentioned, and when we mentioned previously, have other funding available for projects. And or other initiatives. So if that's something that you all have a proposal for and or can make a presentation about, we are always happy to take meetings about such projects. But as for the general grant cycle, yes, that would be ineligible here.
That also falls under the local branches of a national organization, which is an eligible category this year as well.
And then this one, Kate, another budget one. So
yeah,
funding for the organization is separated by department. If our department budget is less than 1.5 million, but the organization budget is not, can we still apply?
I would say no. I think we're going to look at the organization's budget overall. So no, I just don't think there would be a high likelihood of funding. So I don't want to waste your time. And I know that sounds really blunt and direct, but and if you want to have explain the situation and have a more in-depth conversation, I'd be happy to do that. But my instinct is to say no. There's not a high likelihood of funding.
And then we have a question here about funds requested. So we did mention that funds typically are granted $3,000 to $10,000. But this question is, do we have a recommendation about how organizations determine the amount they request? For example, would requesting a lower grant amount increase the likelihood of being funded? Or are requests partially funded rather than declined when limits are reached?
I don't think I said this in this grant cycle, or excuse me, in this orientation, but we have said it in previous orientation. So I'm sorry that I brushed over that. But our typical ask, people do ask, is $10,000 for the max. And that's okay. We're not going to penalize you for asking for the max. Just know that we might not be able to fund that. So no, feel free to ask for what you need.
Great. And then is there any more priority given to rural counties over urban or vice versa?
No, I mean, we have done a lot of place-based work in the Dutchtown Graveway Park area, and we've partnered with a lot of agencies in that area to really see that impact. So we always feel like that's a natural fit for organizations working in that community. So that, which we talked about earlier, kind of is given a priority, but I don't think aside from that, we value rural more than St. Louis County or vice versa.
I think that answers a couple of questions that we have. But would you say specifically in those priority communities, Dutchtown, Graveway Park, North St. Louis, are there any specific activities or priority or geographic regions, even within those that are considered?
I think I would just look back into those top funding priorities, which I can click to slides a few back. Those funding priorities, I mean, those programs that align with those and are in those areas probably are going to have a higher likelihood of funding, and along too with those secondary focus areas, the same thing.
Okay. And then I think there's just one last question here, again, about 990 documentation for agencies and versus specific programs. And again, we grant money from the general grant cycle to an entire agency for general operating funds. So we don't look at individual programs, but an organization as a whole. So any documentation provided would be for the organization as a whole. And then again, we will send out all of this information via email, as well as it'll be posted on our website. But I think that
Yeah, no,
finalizes the questions. No,
I
nothing
think
else.
that sums it up. I'm going to click through really quickly and leave my email and phone number and our website on there. I know Mary's information is also all available on our website as well. So please feel free to reach out to either one of us. Thank you so much for being here today, for taking the time to learn about our grant program. Again, I apologize for this sniffling and articulation when answering a few questions, and I'm happy Mary was here to back me up on all that. We just are so grateful to all of you and all the work you're doing, and are looking forward to reviewing these applications, coming and doing site visits, and supporting everything you're doing for our region. So thank you. And again, we look forward to getting those LOIs Friday, May 24th.